I'm David Ostler, and I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm proud to be a Utah Jazz fan.
All right. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Sometimes active people can decide they feel ostracized at church. How does that happen? David Ostler has written a new book called Bridges, and we'll be talking more about what some people do at church that cause others to feel very uncomfortable. We'll also talk about ways that we can avoid this type of behavior. Check out our conversation. I think one of the things that I like about your book, I'm trying to say this as diplomatically as possible, is it just feels like you get it. I know there are a lot of people that have really good, well-meaning hearts, and they want to talk about this idea of disaffection, but they do it in a way where it feels like we've got to be careful. I have to censor myself because I might offend that person. And it just feels like you are just open, and there's an openness that you frankly don't see at church. I mean, for one thing, I've expressed before, in fact, I actually interviewed Kurt on my podcast a few months ago, and I expressed some frustration that, I don't consider myself in a faith crisis, but I also can't speak up at church. It's not safe. You're and it's almost just better to go sit in the hall and do your own personal study, because everybody's all concerned about everybody's testimony. And for me, and like I said, I don't consider myself in a faith crisis, but I felt the frustration of the people that you talked about in your book. Can you talk about how? Is there anything we can do? I feel as Joe member, I can't talk to my bishop. I can't. I just feel like he'll look at me cross-eyed, and I'll never get a calling again. And can you address that issue?
So when I think what you're talking about is probably a little bit more common than we think. I think that we all want to go to church and look polished and in our best and the like, and we know that we want to be faithful. We know that we want to express confidence in the institutional church and in our own belief. And so sometimes it takes a lot of courage, and it can be kind of very vulnerable for us to express any sort of concern we have that might go against that completely faithful narrative. So it's sometimes very daunting to either raise our hand and say, well, I've got a concern here, or to ask a question, well, what about this? And I think sometimes just because of the nature of our culture, that can be somewhat risky for people. What I found when I started kind of going down this road, maybe it's because of my career background, or maybe because of some of my own personal experiences, I just wanted to listen to what people were saying. I just wanted to kind of understand from their perspective how they felt attached to the church, if they were in crisis, what triggered their crisis, how they felt about it, what their concerns were. And I just kind of went down that road without care about my preconceptions, or whether they would say things that would make me uncomfortable or that I might disagree with personally. And so I really wanted to just truly understand. And I asked a lot of questions. I wanted to know. I asked, why do you feel that way? I'd say some things, and they'd help me see how what I was saying wasn't either on target or wasn't helpful or showed that I didn't understand. And I had some good friends that would kind of help me see my blind spots on that. So I'm grateful that you felt like that voice came through in the book. And one of the ways I did that is I told stories. And I told stories about individuals, and these were people that were willing to share their stories with me. I don't use their names in the book, but they were willing to kind of share their experiences. And I realized that for many people that are in a crisis or don't feel that they can be authentic at church, maybe that's what you're more describing, right?
Exactly.
That isolation and that separation is really very difficult, and sometimes threatens even their desire to participate, because we have such strong feelings about spiritual things, and we have such expectations that in a church community we can feel connected and attached, and we can feel like we belong. We all know we're broken, right? I mean, that's just the gospel, right? We live in a fallen state, we make mistakes, we have blinders, we have, culture behind us. We all know that about ourselves, but it's hard for us to create a culture where that can kind of come out. And one of the stories that I really liked is a story that I tell in the first chapter in my book. It's a story about Amanda. I don't know if you remember that story, but...
Well, people haven't read the book yet, so tell us.
But, Amanda's, did all the things that we teach our youth and our young adults to do. Grows up, graduates from seminary, has a strong testimony, proclaims it, marries in the temple, starts her family on those kinds of gospel principles, and then she has a faith crisis. And it becomes really difficult for her to participate at church. And she doesn't attend church anymore because of, she can't feel like she can be authentic. She doesn't want to disturb anyone else's testimony.
Right. Yeah, that's how I feel.
So, but she needs to have peace, so she stepped away from the church. And let me just, if it's appropriate, let me just read.
Read it. Go ahead. That'd be awesome. And while you're finding that, I'll just tell you something that happened just this year. So, I interviewed Dr. Thomas Wayman from BYU, and he has this awesome study Bible that has all the updated English language and all these awesome footnotes. Like, I just fell in love with it. I'm going to tell everybody, not only should you buy David Ostler's book, but you should go buy Tom Wayman's Bible because it's awesome. But I took that to church. We're teaching New Testament this year. Haven't been to Sunday school in a long time, but I was like, okay, we'll give this a try. We've got the new curriculum. And I was like, so I held it up. I've got this great Bible here, and I wanted to read this. And you'd have thought that I'd brought something here. Even though I preface it, it's from BYU, it's a great Bible, but it's not a King James Bible, so we can't listen to this, And I just got so frustrated.
Well, I've been reading Romans through the Wayman Bible, because we're kind of at that point in our curriculum. And
it's a lot better.
Well, I mean, to me, it's a lot more understandable.
Exactly.
So I think we can have space for that kind of stuff, don't you, Rick?
Yeah, not in my ward. There's no space.
Yeah.
At least I feel that way, and I just feel completely powerless to change it. But, it just feels like our church leaders, and I don't know if this is our pioneer heritage, we've been persecuted so much, and even some of that persecution was within, Oliver Cowdery left the church, Martin Harris left the church, John Whitmer, Peter Whitmer. I mean, we've had a lot of really stalwart people that left, and it seems like there's just we can't have any dissent because dissent leads to bad things. And I mean, I don't know if that's a pioneer thing or whatever, but from my point of view, it's frustrating. And I don't even have a faith crisis, but I can't even bring up a Wayman Bible in the Sunday school, or I get cross-eyed. But
yeah, I just a divergent. My wife has taught me how much. I mean, she's a woman. She comes from a perspective of peace and harmony. She's taught me how we use many images of war in the church, battles, swords, things like that. And, in one Sunday school class, she kind of raised her hand and she says, I think we have too many hymns about war, Battle Hymn of the Republic and, the armies of heaven and, all of this imagery. And, she had a few people that needed to testify to her that war is, in fact, part of God's plan. I get it, but that was kind of a minor issue, right? And yet there was kind of a need to make sure that we toe the line.
I got to bear my testimony and put you straight. It drives me crazy.
So now my wife as she's singing her hymns, instead of singing, the armies of heaven, she sings the angels of heaven, and just subtly kind of changes the words so that it works for her and doesn't disrupt people and the like. But for some people, that disconnection can be acute enough that they they step away and they say, I can't participate. And
because you don't want to be disruptive, and if
No.
they want to go repeat their same thing, I'll sit in the hall and I'll read my Thomas Wayman in the hall.
Yeah.
So I'm still getting edified, but I just can't participate. It feels like so.
Yeah. And, so Amanda's that same way. She couldn't participate, and she had a faith crisis, so she was different than you. Everyone, I think, is different. But she stepped away, and that was really difficult for her. It extracted a social cost. And let me just read this one paragraph. And she talks about how it has influenced her family and her relationship with her parents. The strained relationship has caused Amanda the most pain is the relationship with her parents. Before she had her faith crisis, her mother told her that having a child leave the church is the worst thing that could ever happen to her. She knows they are devastated because they believe, based on church theology, that her leaving the church will affect their relationship in eternity. She wants her parents to still trust that she is a good person, that she is still led by and connected to God, and that she will teach her children to love, be kind, and follow God. But she still feels their disappointment and reflects that perhaps it was too much for them to be proud of her. Towards the end of my interview with her, with tears, she asked for advice on what she could do. It's been really hard. I want to have that relationship back. And so as I went through and talked with people, many of these folks have cost to their challenges of faith. And they feel disconnected from the people around them, from their family, and they feel like sometimes the institutional church doesn't draw them in, but instead, for one reason or another, makes it harder for them to feel connected in a community where we want all to come unto Christ. Where they start, right? Not where we think they should start, but where they really are. And that's where she really is, and she doesn't feel like she can participate, and she feels, cost with her family. And that's not an uncommon story. And it deals with probably a couple of issues that I deal with in the second part of the book.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with David Ostler. In our next conversation, we'll talk about why trust is one of the biggest issues for people with a faith crisis.
And as I surveyed members that are in a faith crisis, many of them have lost trust in all of those aspects. And I could share some of that data with you if you felt like.
Absolutely, we love data.
Yeah, you and I kind of eat data for a living,
Yes.
don't we?
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please support Gospel Tangents and become a subscriber. For just $5 a month, go to patreon.com/gospeltangents and you can hear the entire interview. And you can also get transcripts available at either our Amazon website, or if you want to give the money to me and not Amazon, please subscribe on my website at gospeltangents.com and you can click the yellow subscribe button. Of course, we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and all the other places. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. And don't forget to click here to subscribe on YouTube, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again for listening.